breaking the middle class and no dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer on the other side of the camera. Welcome, everyone, and welcome, Christopher. We're back, of course. We were back yesterday, too, after the long holiday weekend, but which was wonderful that we're finally into nice, summery weather. It's really great to have that. But here's the question I have for you podcast listeners. Is the Democrat Party intentionally trying to break the middle class? Or is it just that they're stupid and they don't know that they are breaking the middle class? Are they trying to do this on purpose? Are they just stupid and they don't know how to manage the economy? Is it a combination of the two? Is it just that they don't know how an economy is supposed to work and they are naturally drawn to kind of Marxist ways of governing? I don't know. You decide. But one thing's for sure, this summer in the Wall Street Journal, Americans, as they start their summer travel season, will be beset by record gas prices. Okay, so you've heard this before, but you know what you haven't heard? That in the summertime in the United States of America, that's when Americans set to the roadways. They get in their cars and they head for the beach. Some Americans head for the mountains where there are lakes. Nonetheless, just about everybody in the United States heads somewhere where there's water so they can go swimming. And most people, most Americans, travel by car to get to those places because they're not traveling cross country by car. They're traveling in a car and they're driving anywhere from, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or maybe 12 hours. But they're nonetheless in their car getting to that place. The national average for gasoline in May, just last month, a couple of days ago, was $4.60 a gallon. Millions of Americans hit the road over Memorial Day weekend, which just passed, with record high gas prices pinching their wallets. The national average price for a gallon of regular unleaded gas hit $4.62 as of Monday, according to AAA, $1.58 higher than a year earlier, and about 12% above the pre-2022 high of $4.11 set in 2008, the last time Joe Biden was in office, but as vice president of the United States. Kind of funny, huh? So you've had really high gas prices under Barack Obama and really high gas prices under Joe Biden. And prior to that, and between those two presidencies, you did not have prices nearly as high. What was the difference? Republican presidents. Prices have risen about 11% over the past month, 11%. The organization's figures indicated, and gas was recently above $4 in all 50 states. The records at the pump come as Americans are contending with 4-decade highs in inflation, paying more for everyday purchases, including milk and bread. Analysts said gasoline prices so far haven't changed many motorists' summer travel plans yet, but it's in part because of pent-up demand for travel after COVID-19 related restrictions. Folks have decided, look, I've been good. I've been hunkering down for 2 years. I'm going to go big, said AAA spokesman Andrew Gross. The organization said in May that 34.9 million Americans were expected to travel by automobile during the Memorial Day weekend that just ended, up 4.5% year over year. And so now that the kickoff of the summer season has begun with Memorial Day weekend, ladies and gentlemen, we know that from this point forward throughout the summer, Americans across the country are hopping in their cars and going on vacation or taking weekend trips, whatever, somewhere where they can get into the water and stay cool and really enjoy their summer. It's a rite of passage in the United States of America. Yet, Americans are going to be reminded all summer long about how out of control the prices are at the pump. And they're going to be reminded every time they go out to eat while on vacation, or every time they go to the grocery store and bring food back to their hotel room or condo while on vacation, how inflation is affecting them. So I asked the question at the beginning of this podcast, is this intentional? Is gas inflation and is the inflation of all other things that you need to live, like food and clothing and obviously fuel, electricity, is this intentionally going up? Is inflation intentionally increasing because of the Democrat policies? But more importantly, is this what they really want to do? Are they really trying to make things more expensive? Is this really what their objective is? So we have a series, ladies and gentlemen, of really, really good clips for you to listen to. And I will let you know in advance, 2 of the clips are 2 minutes long each. They are worth listening to because it really gives you a feeling of what's going on at the national level, what your government thinks of you, and it allows you to truly be a critical thinker when asking the question, is this being done intentionally by your government? So first up, we have Peter Doocy. This is a very short clip, by the way, this first one. Peter Doocy is asking Jean-Pierre, the lady who took over for Peppermint Patty, Jean-Pierre, she's the new White House spokesman. And she was chosen, no doubt, because of the fact that she is not white and is a lesbian, because, you know, that is how you were chosen. You're not chosen based on your competency at the federal level anymore or by any government. I say this, ladies and gentlemen, because in Jean-Pierre's case, she seems incredibly stupid to me, okay? She seems incredibly unprepared and just like out to lunch on some of the basic issues. I mean, even her lying is so bad. I mean, she doesn't even know how to lie because she doesn't even understand the issues. It's kind of fascinating to watch this. I mean, at least with Jen Psaki, at least with Jen, she had a well-rehearsed response for everything. And the response was at least somewhat on message. And you could say, okay, well, that was a bold-faced lie, or that's a bunch of BS, or, you know, she did a great job of averting a true answer to that question. But at least she tried. Not with Jean-Pierre. Jean-Pierre, she just like doesn't even seem to get the question that's being asked and is doing no favor whatsoever to this White House. So once again, remember, ladies and gentlemen, is it intentional that your federal government, run by the Democrat Party, is deciding to break the middle class? Well, here's Peter Doocy asking Jean-Pierre, as part of the White House press corps, about inflation. We have a short clip on that, and here it is.
Does President Biden take any responsibility for his policies potentially contributing to inflation?
When we talk about the gas prices right now, this is indeed Putin's gas hike.
So, ladies and gentlemen, imagine that everything in your country is increasing in price. Everything, okay? Not just energy, but food. Not just food, but electricity. Not just electricity, but clothing. Not just clothing, but building materials when you try to repair your house. Every time you hire someone or try to get someone to fix a repair in your house, like a plumber, that has gone up too, for all the obvious reasons, because his or her material prices are going up, as are the prices of getting from point A to point B because of energy prices. I mean, the entire supply chain is affected by energy, but also, you know, the fact that food prices have been going up for quite some time, even pre-energy increases, is somewhat fascinating. And so what does Jean-Pierre do? It's Putin. Putin is doing it. Putin. Do you believe it? Ladies and gentlemen, podcast land people, do you believe that? Are the Democrats trying to really break the middle class? That is the thesis of today's podcast. I want you to decide. That's why we're going to play 3 more clips for you. And as I said, one is 1 minute and the other 2 are 2 minutes each. It's really worth listening to these clips because it gives you the full, true breadth of a conversation, if not cross-examination, by Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. He's a Republican from Missouri, who is questioning the Secretary of Energy of the United States, Jennifer Granholm. Now, if you don't know who Jennifer Granholm is, ladies and gentlemen, Jennifer Granholm was the former governor of Michigan. She's actually a Canadian, which is kind of interesting. Came to the United States, became an American citizen, and went to Berkeley. There you go, right there. She went to Berkeley. And she's an ideologue. She's not a critical thinker. She's an ideologue. Everything is thought through based on and decided based on her ideology, not based on pragmatism or what is best for people. This is really, I think, who she is. And by the way, she's also wealthy. If you look up her net worth, it says she's worth $8 million. So here you have a Secretary of Energy, a former governor of Michigan who ran the state into the ground, and she gets rewarded naturally by the Biden administration as becoming a secretary of a very important and major department, the Secretary of Energy. And it's her job to make sure that the United States of America is energy independent and energy secure. What does that mean? It means that if we go to war tomorrow, you have not only enough energy to have electricity in your house, to put gasoline in your vehicle, to cut your grass and so forth, but in addition to that, we have enough energy to power our military. And the interesting thing is, she doesn't care. As far as I'm concerned, she doesn't care. I want you to listen to these 3 clips. Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri asks a number of questions to the Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, who's worth $8 million. You think she's really affected by this? No. And I don't know what she makes as a department head anyway. It's probably $200,000 or $300,000, I'm sure, at least $200,000 or $300,000, in addition to the fact that she's married and she and her husband are worth $8 million. Nonetheless, Hawley asks her about gas prices. Now, you heard minutes ago Peter Doocy asking Jean-Pierre about inflation, and she's like, it's Putin that did it. Josh Hawley is going to have none of that because Jennifer Granholm tries to do the same thing, and Hawley calls her out. Listen very carefully, and then ask yourself the question, are Democrats trying to break the middle class intentionally? Here is the first clip. We have it. Here it is.
Today in the state of Missouri, the average price of gasoline today, as of this morning, is $4.10. Average price of diesel is $5.18. And I'm sure you've seen the reporting this morning that now AAA is projecting that gas prices will hit a national average of $6 a gallon by the month of August. Is this acceptable to you?
No, it is not. And you can thank the activity of Vladimir Putin for invading Ukraine and pulling essentially those barrels.
With all due respect, Madam Secretary, that's utter nonsense. In January of 2021, the average gas price in my state was $2.07. 8 months later, long before Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, that price was up over 30%, and it has been going up consistently since.
So you heard Josh Hawley ask the question about the price of energy, the price of gasoline, the price of oil, and Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm, as an ideologue, as all ideologues always do answer questions, says it's Vladimir Putin because an ideologue coordinates with the others in the White House and gives some incredibly stupid answer that they hope that the average American, educated in America's incredibly and increasingly dumbed down education system, will not be able to truly understand and say, yeah, that's right, it is Vladimir Putin. Yeah. And then you hear Josh Hawley he says, well, wait a minute, Secretary of Energy Granholm. The price of gasoline had already increased by 30%. After Biden took office, it increased by 30%. And that was long before Vladimir Putin invaded the Ukraine. It was already going up. and it was already going up, and you had lots of time to adjust and to help and to assist the private sector so that they could make up the difference in the United States of America, and they could drill more, they could pump more. There are a lot of things that could be done. There's lead time that is required, no doubt, in order to be able to pump more oil and so forth. But you didn't do that. So you're blaming Putin. Remember Ducey, Peter Ducey in the White House press corps? He asks Jean-Pierre and she goes, "It's Putin. It's Putin." Can we play that Putin thing again from Ducey? I mean, listen to how this is coordinated. Are we really this stupid? At what point do we just show up at the White House and just look at these people and laugh at them? I mean, I almost think that would be funny. We should have a laughing contest and have like 300,000 people surround the White House. I'm not saying charge the White House. No, I'm not saying that, ladies and gentlemen. I'm saying just stand outside the gates legally outside the White House and just like laugh.
Like an organized laughing.
Yes, a big laughing, like, and just laugh at how stupid these people are and what a joke they are. And I know the rest of the world is laughing at us for sure. Certainly China and Russia are probably laughing at how stupid we are. All of our adversaries are. But anyway, here is Peter Ducey again. Okay, it's the same clip again. I want you to listen to this. So daggone coordinated. Here's that clip. Here it is.
Does President Biden take any responsibility for his policies potentially contributing to inflation?
When we talk about the gas prices right now, this is indeed Putin's gas hike.
Yeah, and here's Josh Hawley. We're going to play the first clip again of that series with Josh Hawley, if we can. Again, in this case, Hawley is asking Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm. You've already heard this clip. We're going to play it again. I want you to understand why this is coordinated, how it's coordinated, and ask yourself the key question. Is the Democrat Party trying to break the middle class and giving you BS answers and trying to do this because they think you're stupid? We have that clip again. Here it is.
Today in the state of Missouri, the average price of gasoline today, as of this morning, is $4.10. Average price of diesel is $5.18. And I'm sure you've seen the reporting this morning that now AAA is projecting that gas prices will hit a national average of $6 a gallon by the month of August. Is this acceptable to you?
No, it is not. And you can thank the activity of Vladimir Putin for invading Ukraine and pulling essentially those barrels.
With all due respect, Madam Secretary, that's utter nonsense. In January of 2021, the average gas price in my state was $2.07. 8 months later, long before Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, that price was up over 30%, and it has been going up consistently since.
Oh, so that's Josh Hawley just laying it out there for Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm. This conversation continues between Hawley and Granholm, and we have another clip. This is 2 minutes long. Again, we're playing this entire clip, and we're doing so because we want you to ask yourself the question, is the Democrat Party trying to break the middle class of the United States of America? We had the second clip and the same exchange, and here it is.
What are you doing to reverse this administration's policies that are drawing down our own supply of energy in this country, that are throttling oil and gas production in the United States of America? What are you doing about it?
With respect, sir, it is not administration policies that have affected supply and demand.
How can you say that when the price of gas was up over 30% from January to... you answer my questions. And it's my time, Madam Secretary. So why don't you answer my question? From January to August, the price of gasoline was up over 30%. In my state alone, it has been a continuous upward tick since then. And here's what your president did when he first came to office. He immediately re-entered the Paris Climate Accord. He canceled the Keystone Pipeline. He halted leasing programs in ANWR. He issued a 60-day halt on all new oil and gas leases and drilling permits on federal lands and waters. That's nationwide. That accounts, by the way, for 25% of U.S. oil production. He directed federal agencies to eliminate all supports for fossil fuels. He imposed new regulations on oil and gas and methane emissions. Those were all just in the first few days. Are you telling me that's had no effect on our energy supply?
94% of the oil and gas executives that were surveyed by the Dallas Fed said that administration policies had nothing to do with the increase in the price of oil.
I'm not interested in opinions of these people. I'm interested in the facts. Are you telling me that these policies had no effect? Is that your testimony that these policies had no effect? Are you telling me, Madam Secretary, are you telling me under oath that these policies had no effect?
I'm telling you that 94% of the oil and gas industry.
I'm not interested in their opinion. I'm interested in the facts.
So, no, they did not. Ask
That is
Vladimir
a remarkable statement
about the increase in demand and the decrease in supply from pulling Russian barrels of oil off the market, thanks to rightly the United States saying we're not going to take Russian oil.
So there you go. This is classic Marxism, ladies and gentlemen. Marxism is when you try to shut down portions of the economy, key portions of it. And you heard Hawley talk about how the Biden administration and Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, have shut down a key portion of the economy. 25% of the oil production in the United States was shut down day one by Joe Biden the first day he was in office, first week, signed all these executive orders. And we have a shortage of oil and of gasoline, which is why the prices have gone up, supply and demand. And Marxists, the first thing Marxists do is to redirect and say, it was Putin. In other words, the Marxists in the United States and the U.S. government are blaming a former communist, who probably technically still is a communist, which is Putin. So it's the perfect redirection, right? Don't look at us, the Marxists. Look at the other real Marxist in the former Soviet Union, Vladimir Putin. He's the one that's making this happen. So then I have to ask you again the question in this podcast, is the Democrat Party, based on what you just heard, trying to break the middle class? Have you heard a sufficient response to Josh Hawley's questions about what the Democrat Party's goal really is? Well, we have another 2-minute clip in this series with Josh Hawley and Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm. Okay? We're giving you the full clips because you have to listen to this. And again, ask yourself, is this intentional? Are they trying to break the middle class of the United States of America? We had that clip, and here it is.
Coming out of COVID.
So what explains the increase between January and August of 2021?
Coming out of COVID, there was an increase in demand because people were driving again. When there was no demand, the prices dropped. That is a basic law of economics. The prices dropped.
I have to say, Madam Secretary, with all due respect, your answers are insulting. And they are insulting to the people of Missouri who are looking for action. Now, you said 2 months ago your department was on war footing. What are you doing to bring down the price of gasoline, which has been going up consistently since you took office?
The price of gasoline is derived from the price of oil. The price of oil is at $110 a barrel.
What are you doing to decrease it?
On
is
a
my
global
question.
market, sir. If you could let me finish.
If you would answer my question.
I am answering your question, sir. Oil is traded on a global market. We are paying extremely high prices today, just as they are in Japan.
What are you doing to get it down?
Just as they are in Germany. Just as they are in South Africa.
What are you doing to get it down?
We are calling for an increase in supply. We are releasing 1 million barrels a day from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to try to balance out.
Who are you getting it calling for an increase in supply from?
It is the largest tool that we have to be able to do that.
Who are you calling for an increase in supply from?
Excuse me.
Secretary, please.
Senator Hawley, your time's expired.
Could I get an answer to this question, Mr. Chairman?
Senator,
Who are you calling for an increase in supply from?
From our domestic oil and gas manufacturers, from international oil and gas manufacturers.
Even as you cancel their leases?
Senator Hawley, if you want to answer, you have to allow the Secretary to answer.
I've said we have called repeatedly for increases in supply from domestic oil and gas manufacturers, from international oil and gas manufacturers. We want to increase supply, and that is why the President released an unprecedented amount from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and our international allies also released from their reserves to try to balance out supply and demand while the oil and gas companies increase supply.
So how do you like that nonsense? Jennifer Granholm saying we are asking the domestic companies that produce oil and extract oil to increase supply. These are the same people, Josh Hawley said, and reminded her that you stopped 25% of their production and made it illegal for them to produce 25% of what they were previously producing. So how do you have them actually increase the supply when you've cut off 25% of their opportunity to extract oil? You can't. You can't increase supply. So what the Democrats are trying to do, which is what Hawley is trying to expose and did expose in that brilliant exchange, by the way, is he exposed an ideologue who's a Marxist, Jennifer Granholm. She is 100% Marxist, who really believes that you should kill the demand. She doesn't want to increase the supply. She wants to kill demand. So then I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, in podcast land, after having heard this entire exchange, which we just played for you, in its entirety, we did not like strategically cut anything out. You heard everything. Do you believe the Democrats are trying to break the middle class? Do you believe that it is intentional? Is it intentional? Are Democrats intentionally trying to break the middle class? Do you believe that? I must say, after having heard this exchange, probably the single best exchange between a Democrat ideologue, once again, an ideologue being someone who isn't the least bit interested in critical thinking skills. They just believe what they believe because it is a religion to them. They have taken on climate change as a religion, and they do not care how it hurts you because she's worth $8 million. Why would she care? It doesn't affect her whatsoever. And you heard how crass she is. First, she started the whole, it's Putin that did it, and it's the Russians. Meanwhile, she's the Marxist. She's the Marxist. These are the people crushing the middle class. They are intentionally, ladies and gentlemen, breaking the middle class. And in classic Marxism-Leninism, okay, in classic Marxism-Leninism, what is the first thing that you have to do as a government in order to implement communism and Marxism and Leninism? You've got to break and destroy the middle class. You have to. And once you do that, you have a ruling class. Those are the people who are the wealthy people, and they are the ruling class, the connected. And then you have everyone else, the peasants, the deplorables. Call them what you might. This is what they are doing. This is what your government is doing to you. And that's what I said. That's why I was saying before, and Chris was participating too, our producer, saying, why don't we just get 100,000, 200,000 people and just surround the White House? I'm not saying attack the White House. That's the last thing I would suggest, okay? Peacefully surround the White House. Don't breach the grounds and just laugh. Laugh. Just have everybody joke and just talk about how stupid this president is, how he's a Marxist, how he's losing his mind. Laugh at these people that they don't understand supply and demand. They don't understand markets. Although, let's face it, I think they do understand them. They're just trying to break the middle class, but we just laugh at them. We just laugh at them. I mean, why not laugh at this moron, Jean-Pierre, who's the White House spokesman, who thinks that you're dumb enough to believe that Vladimir Putin is the reason for the price hikes in the United States of America? That's what we should do. And we should also maybe, I don't know, go to the Secretary of Energy's, Jennifer Granholm's office and do the same thing there. Just laugh at her. Of course, I'm sure she has a driver. All these secretaries, by the way, have drivers. They don't drive anywhere, which is another whole issue with government, federal government. And by the way, some state governments as well, where elected officials have drivers. That is just so wrong. It is. It's just everything about it is wrong. But they don't have to worry about gasoline because I'm sure the government's paying for their gasoline when their driver takes them places. But remember, yesterday in our podcast, we played that clip for you that was from Davos, Switzerland, where the idiot who is ahead of Alibaba, that's Chicom company, the Alibaba Group president, J. Michael Evans. He was at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. And remember, we were talking yesterday about this, about how he wants a carbon footprint tracker. So I'm going to play this again, and you tell me how you think this is connected with these ideologues who are now in the White House and Secretary Jennifer Granholm. We have that clip again, and here it is.
We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
So stay tuned. It's not operational yet, but boy, imagine the possibilities with having this tracker in place and being able to measure what's really going on. Now, granted, these are the globalists, right? But the globalists are also occupying the White House. And the globalists are Jennifer Granholm, who believe that you are not a citizen of the United States anymore, and that you do not have a government that is by and for the people. Instead, what you have is a government that is ruling you, that is telling you the way things are going to be. And you heard that entire conversation with Hawley and Granholm. You heard the conversation with Ducey and Jean-Pierre. And now, again, we ask the question, is it intentional? And are these individuals who are ideologues and Marxists trying to break the middle class? You heard the carbon footprint tracker idiot at Davos, Switzerland. Why wouldn't they try to break the middle class? Why else would they want to measure your carbon footprint? If they're not trying to control you, then why would they try to measure it? Because ultimately, the goal is, look, in my home state of Maryland, we had this one delegate from Baltimore, and I remember talking about this quite some time ago. His name's Dan Morheim. And this guy, Dan Morheim, he was a member of the House of Delegates from Baltimore. He put a bill in, and it was a bill to measure your carbon footprint. So every time that you would get, for example, your electricity bill, the electricity company would be required to put on your bill your carbon footprint, which would only be measured by how much electricity you used. Okay? So they weren't measuring your footprint of how much gasoline you used to get from point A to point B in your car, because they couldn't. What was measurable would be how much electricity you used from month to month. And this guy's bill that he put in was for the purpose of having the electricity company, when you received your electricity bill, to say, oh, you used X amount of kilowatts of electricity, and for each kilowatt, we're going to say that that's one carbon footprint, and here's how many carbon footprints you used last month. And so that's all the bill did, ladies and gentlemen. But remember, I was on that committee, and I asked this guy, Dan Morheim, I asked him, I said, what would be the purpose of measuring the carbon footprint? What is the purpose of it? He goes, well, I just think people would like to know what their carbon footprint is. I said, well, I have a question for you. If I have solar panels on my house, as an example, which I do not, but let's just say I did, and I used a lot of electricity, and I was doing all the right things, do I get credit for that? He goes, well, no, we're still going to measure how much electricity you're using, because since you're still connected to the grid, we know how much electricity you're still using, even with those solar panels. We're still measuring that as electricity. So that's part of your car. So I said, so in other words, it doesn't matter how green I am. What you want me to do is to use less electricity, period. And of course, he smiled and so forth. Said, well, is the ultimate goal of this to try to tax people for their carbon footprint? And then he smiled and, was like, oh, no, we're not trying to. Well, of course they are. Why would you measure it if you're not trying to control people through taxation or through some other restrictive means? That's precisely what they wanted to do, this guy, Dan Morheim. Now, ultimately, finish that story. Ultimately, this guy ended up being kicked out of the House of Delegates because of the fact that he put the bill in to make marijuana legal in Maryland. And then, of course, at the same time, had hired a consulting company and was a consultant to a company to do what? To get a license to grow marijuana in Maryland while he put the bill in. So, typical Democrat, right? Typical career type politician. But I digress. The point is, these individuals want to use these devices of trackers and footprints to control you. And so I have to ask the question, are they trying to break the middle class? And is it intentional? And I think we kind of know what the answer to that is. I mean, even the Wall Street Journal did an article recently about Senator Elizabeth Warren. So Elizabeth Warren put in a price gouging bill for oil companies, right? Now, keep in mind, you just heard the exchange with Josh Hawley, okay, and Jennifer Granholm, where she acknowledged and certainly didn't rebut the fact that the Biden administration has shut down 25% of the oil production in the United States of America, which has caused shortages and caused prices to skyrocket long before Putin invaded the Ukraine. And if that weren't enough, you got Elizabeth Warren going, they're gouging. The oil companies are price gouging. They're the bad guys. So once again, that's what a Marxist does, right? A Marxist has to create villains. They're the ones who have caused the problems, but then they try to create villains out of the people that could actually get us out of this mess. And that's exactly what they did in Venezuela. In fact, the Wall Street Journal even called her out about that. They called her the senator from Venezuela. And by her, I mean Elizabeth Warren. The Wall Street Journal basically said, look, when you put price controls in and you put bills to control prices, and at the same time, you're restricting demand as the government, the government's restricting demand and taking all this production offline intentionally, and then telling the oil companies that they can't charge but a certain amount, then you know what happens? You don't have enough of anything. It's no longer a price issue. You don't have enough. You have empty store shelves, basically. You have gas stations without any gas, which, by the way, happened before in American history. And I'm not sure if you remember when that happened, but oh my gosh, it happened, which is why we wanted to become energy independent. And I bring this up to you, ladies and gentlemen, at great detail today, because I believe that today's modern Democrat Party, I believe they do not care that they are breaking the middle class. And I believe that they are indeed intentionally trying to break the middle class. I'm not necessarily sure they know what the outcome of that would be. I'm not necessarily sure they understand what they would do next after they broke the middle class and after they forced you to not have a vehicle and they forced you to no longer to have movement and they tracked your carbon footprint and they controlled every aspect of your life, including what you put in your body and what you eat and so forth. I'm not sure what their plan is ultimately, but one thing history has taught us, it never ends very well. Marxism never ends very well. And I believe they are the Biden administration and all the ideologues that are surrounding him and the Democrat Party at large, really at the national level, but even in my state, the Democrat Party, I believe they resent the middle class. And I believe they resent the American system of success and of movement and of freedom of movement. So next up, podcast listeners, Senator Marco Rubio stops single-handedly a military drag queen story hour. So Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, I guess he heard through the grapevine that I'm sure someone called him and told him who was in the military that strange things are happening on military bases across the country and perhaps the world. The United States military is having drag queen story hour for kids. And Rubio looked into it and found out that actually that's true. So in the Epoch Times, an overseas U.S. Air Force base, so it's not even in the United States, but it is a U.S. Air Force base, has canceled a children's storytime hour program featuring a drag queen after a Republican congressman demanded the show be dropped. The Ramstein U.S. Air Force Base in Germany canceled the event initially planned for June 2nd, called Drag Queen Storytime, after Senator Marco Rubio, the Republican from Florida, sent a letter on May 26 to Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall urging him to cancel what the congressman called a public-funded propaganda. I like that. It is public-funded propaganda. Quote, Rubio says, I urge you to immediately cancel this politically divisive event and take appropriate disciplinary action against all involved in allowing this gross abuse of taxpayer funding to place children in a sexualized environment, Rubio's letter reads. You know what, Chris? Chris, our producer, who's on the other side of the camera, that's what we should do. The next time we hear about a public school, especially at the elementary level, which apparently is legal in our state to do this. It's now legal in our state in Maryland to have drag queen story hour and to teach gender identity and these other kind of ideologies and other propaganda. We should send a letter ourselves to the superintendent and to the teacher who's decided to teach this and say the same thing. Namely, we should use the same wording, which is you need to stop doing this because allowing this gross abuse of taxpayer funding and placing children in a sexualized environment, because that's exactly what you're doing. You're using taxpayer money to sexualize children in elementary school. That's pretty good. And by the way, we've said this many times before, but the difference is if you put it in writing, now there's a record of it. There's a record that you have identified that this is happening. And if they don't rebut it, then of course you probably have plenty of parents who know that it's happening too, not because they're there, but because their kids are telling them and they're receiving information like handouts that they're taking home, drawing drag queens, God knows what. Anyway, the event, the military event that Marco Rubio was referring to, was to feature drag queen Stacy Teed at the military base's Ramstein Library and was intended to celebrate the month of June as Pride Month. We're celebrating Pride Month at the Ramstein Library with Drag Queen Storytime. The now deleted event announcement on Facebook read, join us with special guests, reader, Stacy Teed. Be sure to wear your brightest and most colorful outfits. In his letter, Rubio noted the U.S. military bases are for warfighting. And the purpose of amenities in these bases, such as schools and libraries, is to support the needs of service members and their families. On installations, quote, outside the continental United States, these amenities play an even more central role in the life of our service members and our families, Rubio said. In light of this, it is completely insane for Ramstein Air Force Base to use on-installation resources for rituals like drag queen storytime. Rubio described events like Ramstein's Library Drag Queen Storytime as extremely divisive because they cause children to interact with intentionally and explicitly sexualized adults. Another good line, which is true, by the way. It's not just a line. So again, he said that Drag Queen Storytime is divisive because it causes children to interact with intentionally and explicitly sexualized adults. Because what else is it to be a drag queen than to be sexualized? What else is it to be LGBTQ plus and teaching it in elementary school, but to be sexualized? There is no other purpose. Clearly, there's no other purpose. And I just think it's remarkable that we even have to have a conversation that it would be happening in public schools, but the fact that it would be happening in military schools, military bases overseas, and who's in charge? Like, who's giving the, go ahead? Because in the military, you have a chain of command. Who's in the chain of command going, oh, I think this is a great idea, That's what we need, We need to send more drag queens to the Ukraine to help on the front lines. That'll really work. So, an example of the materials featured at the drag queen event at Ramstein military event, according to Rubio, you ready for this? Include books such as The Hips on the Drag Queen Go Swish, Swish, Swish. So, again, you tell me that's not sexualizing children, okay? Again, the example of materials featured at the Ramstein Air Force Base Drag Queen Hour, according to Marco Rubio, include books such as, how he did not laugh when he was reading this, quote, The Hips on the Drag Queen Go Swish, Swish, Swish. The author of the book said they wrote it so that children could experience the magic of drag and to get a little practice shaking their hips or shimmying their shoulders to know how they can feel fabulous inside of their own bodies, Rubio said, because he's reading, of course, from the author's book. These are children, okay? Quote, the last thing parents serving their nation overseas should be worried about, particularly in a theater with heightened geopolitical tensions, such as in Germany, is whether their children are being exposed to sexually charged content simply because they visited their local library. The congressman added, actually he's a senator, an Air Force spokesman confirmed with the Epoch Times on June 1 that the event had actually been scrapped due to scheduling conflicts, and not as a result of the individual speaking out against the event or against the LGBTQ plus community. No one's speaking out against the LGBTQ plus community. They're saying these morons don't belong in public schools, let alone in elementary schools. That's what we're saying. I mean, come on. This is the classic response, right? You just don't like these LGBTQ. No, I don't think it belongs in public schools. The spokesman said in an email that wing leaders of the 86th Airlift Wing had requested the event be broadened to represent the full LGBTQ plus community, but the 86th Force Support Squadron was unable to modify the event in time for the June 2nd scheduled event. So I just had to read this to you because I don't think the American people really know or understand what is happening in their military, not just here on military bases in the United States, but also overseas, and how it's one thing to try to indoctrinate the forces, but now they're trying to even indoctrinate the children of the forces and sexualizing them with books like The Hips on the Drag Queen Go Swish, Swish, Swish. Sorry, that is just too funny. And if that's not enough, in North Carolina, flashcards depicting LGBT themes used to indoctrinate North Carolina preschoolers, ladies and gentlemen. The incident was revealed in a press release from Representative Tim Moore, the Republican Speaker of the North Carolina House of Representatives, the Western Journal reported. Republican State Representative Aaron Paré was alerted to this via an email from a concerned parent. This week, Representative Paré, who's a Republican from Wake, North Carolina, received an email from a concerned constituent alerting her to the use of LGBTQIA plus MOUSE themed flashcards, including a card with the depiction of a pregnant man to teach colors to children in a preschool class at Ballantyne Elementary School. So here we go. Teaching colors, right? You're trying to show and teach children colors. So what they did was they had flashcards for the preschoolers, and the flashcards were the colors of not one color on a card, which is, of course, how you would teach colors. Here is red, and there you put up a red flashcard, correct? Just red. Here's yellow. There's a different flashcard, all yellow flashcard. That would be a true way of teaching colors using flashcards. That's not what happened here. What happened here is a single card had the pride flag on it. and then another flashcard that pulled up had a woman behind a man, and the man was pregnant. So, you know how you see pictures online, especially on social media, and there's a husband and wife and they're taking like a formal picture, or they had a photographer, and one of the pictures that the photographer had them pose in was the husband, and he's behind the wife and he has his arms around her. Okay. And maybe another picture would be his wife or his girlfriend or whatever. Maybe she's pregnant and they decided to take pictures, and he's behind her and he's holding her and holding her tummy. Okay. That would be kind of more of a traditional picture, perhaps, that you would see. Well, this flashcard that they're showing the North Carolina kids is the wife behind the man, and he's the pregnant one. And Chris, I'm not sure if you could pull this up and show the picture, but it's like, it's on this flashcards depicting LGBT themes used to indoctrinate North Carolina preschoolers. So this is what's happening in your public schools, ladies and gentlemen. This is a public school. It's not a private school. And it happens because we're not pushing back enough, and because you have these idiots that are just like completely and utterly out of control and, you know, just like trying to control every aspect of your child's life and basically saying, hey, we're the ones who are raising your children. You no longer have a say in the matter. So we just had to bring this up. Good for you, Marco Rubio, for bringing this up about the military and what's really happening on these bases in the public school system. And in North Carolina, good for you for calling out this school, this public school, using flashcards to indoctrinate children about men who are pregnant. I mean, can you imagine how much dumber could you grow up than saying, men can get pregnant? It's like, what the heck? So lastly, podcast listeners, we have this story for you. Peter Doocy asks White House press secretary if the administration would consider handgun ban. So the administration, of course, is all about banning guns. We all know that. Democrats are all about banning guns. They don't believe in the First Amendment or the Second Amendment or the Constitution whatsoever. This we know. Okay? But the administration has kind of hinted that maybe they want to get rid of handguns. And so Peter Doocy asks Jean-Pierre, who's the White House press spokeswoman, asks her about this very matter, about a handgun ban. We have that clip, and here it is.
Canada is making it impossible to buy, sell, transfer, or import handguns anywhere in that country. Would President Biden ever consider a similar restriction on handguns here?
So, we'll leave it up to other countries to set their policy on gun ownership. The president has made his position clear. The United States needs to act, as I just laid out. He supports a ban on sale of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines and expanded background checks to keep guns out of the dangerous hands. He does not support a ban on the sale of all handguns, to answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
So that is an exchange that just occurred between Peter Doocy and Jean-Pierre. And the reason that exchange occurred, other than, of course, the shooting that happened in Uvalde, Texas, as you know, which is awful, is that Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau just introduced legislation to freeze all sales and purchases of handguns and impose a buyback of military-style semi-automatic weapons. And that just happened yesterday. The legislation further intends to limit all long gun magazines to hold no more, than 5 rounds and ban the sale of high-capacity magazines. So again, there's a shooting in America, and the Prime Minister of Canada says, well, I'm going to put legislation in to freeze the sales and purchases of handguns and impose a buyback of weapons. Quote, today, we're proposing some of the strongest measures in Canadian history to keep guns out of our communities and build a safer future for everyone, Trudeau said in the press release. Canada passed legislation in May 2020 banning over 1,500 types of firearms after a mass shooting in Nova Scotia that left 23 people dead. President Joe Biden urged the federal government to stand up to the gun lobby in response to the Robb Elementary School mass shooting that killed 19 children and 2 fourth graders. So you can see, ladies and gentlemen, that the whole Davos crowd, the in crowd, the globalist crowd, they want to eliminate your ability to defend yourself, to protect yourself, and most importantly, to defend your freedom. So first, they're attacking the middle class, and they're doing it intentionally, and they are destroying and breaking the middle class through high prices and through inflation. They're doing it intentionally, all under the guise of global warming and climate change. And then they're going to prevent you from being able to defend yourself, not necessarily from bad people, but from the government, which are the worst people. We know that. We all know that. The founders of this great nation warned us about this, and yet here it is happening in real time. And that's it from Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Getter, Truth Social, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.